All right. Well, good evening, everyone, or good morning, depending on where in the world you might be. If you want to just drop in the chat where you are, I had a couple of people from Peru, somebody from Germany in the afternoon session. So we'll see where folks are from. Um, I'm Ann Lewis. I'm the executive director of the South Dakota Discovery Center in Pierre, South Dakota. That's one of the hats I wear. I'm also the project lead for the MacroBlitz project, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. And I'm also a National Geographic explorer. And so National Geographic was the one that put the funding behind MacroBlitz and made it as you're seeing it tonight. I've done stuff with macroinvertebrates on and off, but this was sort of courtesy of National Geographic, the thing that made it MacroBlitz. Our mission is to inspire and empower people to find and photograph aquatic macroinvertebrates and upload their photos to iNaturalist for science and for learning. And that is quite a mouthful, so I'm going to unpack some of that. Let's go ahead. First of all, let's look at the term aquatic macroinvertebrate. Um, Basically, it's an organism without a backbone. That's the invertebrate part. It lives some or all of its life in water, specifically freshwater, as opposed to marine environments. That's the aquatic part. And it's the size is between micro and mega. That's the macro part, usually smaller than 2 inches or 5 centimeters. So, but large enough to be seen unaided with the naked eye. Just get that out of the way. iNaturalist, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. I imagine there are varying degrees of familiarity. It's an online social platform where you upload geolocated photos or sound recordings, and aquatic macroinvertebrates tend to be pretty quiet. So for this project, we don't really worry too much about the sound portion of it. And you upload wild and natural organisms, observations of wild and natural organisms. Again, not too many captive or cultivated macros, but good to know. Um, your potted plants, your dogs, your pet cats, all of them are amazing, but they're not really what iNaturalist is all about. So let's take a moment and get some inspiration for iNaturalist. This is Dalal Hanna, a Canadian National Geographic explorer, and she's gonna.
Freshwater macroinvertebrates are these incredible tiny creatures that play a big role in the functioning of ecosystems. They're the base of many food chains and really good indicators of the general health of freshwater systems. My name is Dalal Hanna. I'm a Canadian National Geographic explorer and freshwater conservation scientist. My research brings me into freshwater systems to collect all kinds of information, but some of my most favorite information to collect is macroinvertebrate information, because macroinvertebrates are really cool. They nest into the sand and thrive in freshwaters throughout the world, and they are excellent indicators of overall freshwater health. I got involved with the MacroBlitz project because I think macroinvertebrates are this awesome sort of secret treasure hiding in the streams and rivers that I'd love for more people to get the chance to connect with. These tiny insects make their homes on the rocks, leaves, and branches at the bottom of streams and rivers. There are so many different kinds of them, each with their special features and skills. And when you stop and take the time to get a closer look, you realize just how wonderful they are. But unfortunately, the abundance of macroinvertebrates is declining. And although we know that this is a problem we need to try to solve, scientists can barely keep track of what's going on. So to me, MacroBlitz is a way to address that. It's a way for everyone to get involved, to help document what's happening to macroinvertebrates around the world so that we can find ways to protect them.
A beautiful goose! Look at its gills! It's awesome!
I've always loved freshwaters, but as an educator and a parent, my understanding of just how important they are has deepened. We need to protect them and all the beautiful creatures that inhabit them, including the small but mighty macroinvertebrates. So come on, join us. Find your local stream, soak in its beauty, flip a rock, take a picture, upload it to iNaturalist and MacroBlitz. This collaborative effort has so much to teach us all.
So whenever I see this, I want to run out and go macro blitzing, even though right now it's about 33 degrees, about 1 degree Celsius, and getting ready to storm. I still want to get out there with my net. Before we go into the nuts and bolts of what is MacroBlitz, some things you might want to know. First of all, it's additive. It fits with other aquatic macroinvertebrate monitoring projects, regardless of protocol or monitoring equipment. So if you are doing a really rigorous water quality study where you are using your macroinvertebrate information your for your integrated report to Congress about water quality, you can add MacroBlitz to it. If you're doing a community event like with a Meet the Macros kind of night, you can add MacroBlitz to that. It really is fits well with other existing programs. Something else to be aware of is MacroBlitz is focused on biodiversity and not water quality. So we're just looking to see what's there as opposed to trying to make a water quality determination, because that water quality determination requires representative samples. It requires usually a certain number of macroinvertebrate samples to analyze. And we just decided when we're setting up the project that we just want a snapshot. What do you see when you stick your net in the water, swish it around, and pull it out? That's what we want to know. You take a picture and you upload it to iNaturalist. And finally, MacroBlitz is a community and not just an iNaturalist project, that we have ways for you to connect with other MacroBlitzers and to share your story, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. The community is you can join the MacroBlitz project on iNaturalist, and we will be looking at iNaturalist, doing a deeper dive into that at the end of the session. And every month to 6 weeks, I post a journal or journal entry, and I invite people to comment, have conversation around that, so you can start finding other people involved in MacroBlitz. I invite you to join the MacroBlitz Google Classroom, where it will have a lot of the content that we're covering tonight. This session actually will be uploaded to that. So if there's something we talk about or you miss, you can go back and re-listen to it. Just a heads up that because of Google domain compatibility, you probably will have to join with a personal Google account, with a Gmail or an email that's been connected to a Google account. That's because macroblitz.org is a Google workspace, but it's the cheapest kind. And so it does not play with nonprofit or education accounts. So if you're a teacher and you're in a Google workspace, you use Google products, you probably can't join the MacroBlitz Google Classroom. Who am I to defy Google? But to figure out how to be part of all those things, go to www.macroblitz.org. And yes, you have to put in the www, at least for now, and the information will be there. All right, let's talk about finding aquatic macroinvertebrates. I know some of you already do this, but if you don't, we'll just go through a very quick overview of content that is already part of the classroom modules. And we're going to talk about getting ready and gearing up. We're going to talk about where do you find macroinvertebrates and how do you collect them. The first thing you're going to do, of course, when you are doing MacroBlitz is you're going to pick a site. Where are you going to go to find these critters? Three things you need to be thinking about. Is it safe? And by safe, it means can you get there safely? Are there cars whizzing around? What's the access into the water like? If it's moving water, if it's flowing water, how deep is it? I do not recommend going into water that is flowing, that is above your knees. Um, and the faster it flows, the lower down it should be on your leg. Is it accessible? Meaning, can you get there without kind of undue effort? Especially if you are bringing younger people, if you're bringing people with mobility issues, think about that through all those different lenses. And then you're going to want to think about, is it legal? So you will want to inform, and this is particularly true in the US. I'll let other countries, I won't speak for them, but you'll want to inform the landowner or the land manager. And by land manager, that means if you're in a park, you'll want to inform the park manager. You'll need to know if you need a permit or a license. In South Dakota, my state in the US where we're operating, you are allowed to collect and even take home invertebrates for personal use. If you're collecting them for um, research purposes, you can't. But if you're just doing it for personal collection, you may. I've talked to a previous wildlife permit issuer person, and she said that iNaturalist constitutes personal use. In Pennsylvania, for example, you have to have a fishing license because you're catching and releasing this aquatic organism. Um, if you're in New York, you might need a permit. I know in California to hold macroinvertebrates, you need a permit. So, especially if you're working with a group as part of an agency or organization, you should at least have a conversation with your Department of Conservation or Game or whoever oversees uh, fish and wildlife at your level, just to make sure you're legal, because you're documenting it, you're putting it up on iNaturalist, and everyone's going to know you did it. So, all right, come on. There we go. Let's talk a minute about gear. So you need gear that will do all these things. And this is sort of what my gear set looks like. You need something to collect the macros out of the water. And I use these nets. This is just a student grade, what's called D net, because it's hard to see here, but it's got a flat bottom and a D-shaped top, and the net is attached to that. Then I use this very fine mesh aquarium net. I think you can buy them. They're like sold as shrimp, fine net shrimp nets. I don't know. When you're holding them on land, I like these collapsible tubs. They're sold as usually camping dishwashing sinks. It just makes them easier to store. And I usually use two, one as a tray and then one as to hold my critters. You'll need something to pick them up out of their holding tank so you can get a deep, closer look at them. I just use a white spoon and a pipette. I don't use forceps. Um, these critters are tough, but they can also be fragile. So I'm trying not to stress them anymore. I'm trying not to break off a tail or a gill or anything like that. So I'll use the spoon and the pipette. You'll need to isolate them so you can take their picture. You just try to want to get one at a time. It doesn't always work out, but I just use a petri dish. I know other programs use ice cube trays, clear cups. If you are already doing some sort of aquatic macroinvertebrate program, you can just put what you use in the chat. You need something, and this is unique to us, something to photograph and magnify them, get them big enough to see so you can take a decent photograph. This device here is a clip-on magnifying lens that I put onto my phone. We'll be doing taking a closer look at photography. That's new this year, different options for taking photos at the end. So you may or may not need one of these. I like to use the Right in the Rain card to measure them. I put it underneath my petri dish so you get a sense of how big these organisms are. Each one you can't. It's hard to see the up in the left to right here, but there's a grid here that is each side is 6.35 millimeters or a quarter inch. So I find that useful when you're looking at organisms. And then because I do this a lot, I want to be comfortable and safe. And so I actually carry a gardening stool with me. Um, Other people will have different requirements for what comfortable and safe is, but just be sure you're thinking about that with your equipment. All right, so where do you find these macroinvertebrates? Well, you will find them usually in one of two types of environments: lentic, still or slow moving water, and lotic, flowing water systems. So if you think of lotic, floatic, if you want little float, that's a little play on words, floatic, to remind you that lotic means flowing. And lentic, I was told this afternoon, lente is Italian for slow. So I think of it as lean. It's the first two letters. Lentic and lean have the same first two letters. So leaning, you're just kind of there. You're not moving. And these two systems have different arrangements of macroinvertebrates. In the lentic system, you're going to find a lot of aquatic macroinvertebrates in the water column or attached, just kind of hanging out in the vegetation up here. And that's because the water's not moving that quickly. So they can kind of move around and they can find their food and they can hide from predators. Some of them even will be on top, like the water striders up here. Some of them do bury down into the sediment. Dragonflies actually do burrow a little bit. You'll find dragonflies in the sediment. So this is what a representation of a lentic system. And when you're trying to get them out of the water, it's a slightly different process than you would use in the lotic or the flowing system. You can see that most of these organisms are hanging on to rocks, or this one's over here, it's buried in the sediment. And the reason for that is they are trying to have to adapt to the moving water. So they just hold on to something and they let the water bring their food by. This one, I don't even know if you could see it. This one is hanging out in the leaf pack. So, they do kind of will move around if they have a little bit of cover and protection in the leaf pack. So, but again, their adaptation is for moving, flowing water, and it's a very different system than the lentic system. So how do we collect in these two different systems? So again, we're going to check in with Dalal here and see how you collect macroinvertebrates in a lotic system.
This kind of branch in the water is like prime invert habitat. So I'm just gonna give it a good rub, allowing the current to have whatever comes downstream flow into it. And then I'm gonna get to see what's living on this branch, and I'm sure there's a lot. So I just give it a nice rub so that anything that comes off of it goes into my net. At the same time, I can also rub the rocks that are around. They're also prime habitat. I can pick up some rocks off the bedrock, give them a good rub the sediment at the bottom of the stream, keeping my net right here so that it catches anything that comes off these rocks. And then I swoop my net up, and I gotta make sure to swoop it up right into the current so that nothing comes out. Oh my goodness! Woo!
I'd love to know what she found. That was pretty exciting. So you can see, I mean, literally, that is the collection protocol. I know different programs have different ways of collecting it, and those are all awesome and good. You don't have to do it this way if you have already have a way to collect. If you use kick nets or leaf packs, continue to do that. This is for people who don't have a method for collection. Let's look at collecting in a lentic system.
Collect macros with jab and sweep. Start by rinsing out your tub. Collect a little bit of water to hold your macros. With a big net, jab along the bottom, then sweep it up out of the water. Turn your net into the tub. You may have to turn your net inside out. Gently wipe or rinse the net to remove any clinging macros. With a small net, start at the base of the vegetation and jab your way upwards. Sweep the net out of the water, turn it into the tub.
So, again, pretty self-evident. One, you're letting the water through the loadic system, you're letting the water carry it into the net. Essentially, in the lentic system, you're swishing the net through the water to try to scoop it out. All right, so now that we've picked our place, we got our gear together, we've actually gone out and collected the macros. It's time to take their photos because this is part of uploading them to iNaturalist. And it's important to keep in mind that when you are taking a photo of an aquatic macroinvertebrate, the goal of the photo is that it should be identifiable to, for MacroBlitz purposes, somewhere order and family, that taxonomic level that starts with, well, when I was in school, kingdom, phylum, class, order, uh, family, genus, species. So we are going to try to stay at that order to family level, um, because that is probably the most realistic for a MacroBlitz community. The To get down to genus and species, you often need details that are really hard to capture in the field with the kinds of equipment we're going to be using. Sometimes you need to look at the mandibles. Sometimes you need to look at the claws on their tarsal, the toes on their tarsal claw. I mean, uh, so we're just thinking about what can we tell when we take a picture of a macro, usually the dorsal or the back side, and upload it to iNaturalist. And that usually we can get it to order or family. In your picture, you'll want a general impression of the size and shape. In birding, that's called GIS. And you'll want to, as much as possible, to get the diagnostic characters, the gills, the tails, the antenna, the wing pads, the legs. And this is particularly true for insects. We're focusing a lot on insects, even though there are other kinds of aquatic macroinvertebrates. They're not all insects. Insects have 6 legs, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Um, there are other kinds of arthropods that don't have 6 legs. So this was a photo I uploaded a while ago, and I was able to get it to family, the Haliplidae, and so crawling water beetle. And someone else came along and said, yes, that's at family level. And then Matthew came along and got it down to subgenus, Paraliaphalus. Okay. He does a lot with beetles, aquatic beetles on iNaturalist. And that's one of sidebar. That's one of the cool things is that you'll see people in their expertise showing up on some of your showing up to ID on some of your photos. So a big shout out to our identifiers. But this is good. Even though it's technically not a great photo, we were still able to get an identification off of it. So it's serviceable. Let's talk a little about the different kinds of photography equipment that we can use. So when I started uh, MacroBlitz, my first go-to was use your phone because everybody has a phone, or almost everybody has a phone. And that's actually one of the pros is that you're using something you probably already have. I know outside the US, they're often called mobiles. So mobiles. So whether you call it a phone or a mobile, it's something you already have. You can add an inexpensive clip-on lens. So with this, for example, is a Zenvo, Xnevo, and this is a rubber band. Um, it's called Easy Macro Lens, and it's got a magnifier lens, and you just situate the magnifier lens in the band over the proper lens on your phone, and it can actually take some pretty nice photos. The cons with using your phone, especially if you're thinking about using it in a group situation with students, is internet accessible devices are increasingly not allowed in educational settings. I had a teacher in New York I work with say, what do I do? How I can't use phones. I can't even have a phone unless you get depart approval from the Department of Ed. And honestly, who wants to do that? So what should I do? And I'll talk about the solution we came up with. You also might really not want to have your phone near the water. I don't think I've ever dropped my phone in the water, but I have had my phone in my pocket when I slipped into the water. Um, so yeah, that's not something you necessarily want to have going on, and a very good reason why you might want to consider something else other than a phone for your photography. This is another option. This is called the Olympus TG, and TG stands for tough grade. It takes quality photos. Uh, of course, that all depends on who's taking the photo and the skill of the person. And you'll see a little bit of that in a moment. And it is tough. It is water resistant. It actually can be used as an underwater phone. It's dust resistant. It's pretty rugged. I've dropped it. I've only been using mine for about a year. Yeah, about a year. And bonus, it has a built-in GPS so you can log location in your photos. And for those of you who are familiar with iNaturalist, you have to upload a geolocated photo for it to even be considered for further identification. If it's missing some critical metadata, like when it was taken, uh, and where it was taken, it's called casual and it's just kind of kept in iNaturalist limbo. The cons against using the Olympic TG, it's expensive. It's about $500 to $600 US. So um, there is a bit of a learning curve, more than with a phone, and I'm still learning. And if you were to think about trying to do this with a group, like if you had a group of students or you were doing a public day, an awareness day, managing this would be challenging. So just something to think about. Now, the next one is something called a coin microscope. And this one, I thought of it. I was so proud of myself. I was like, oh, we could use that. And I bought one, and I took it out and I used it, and I found out it was good for it was a good option. Um, it I think it would work really well if you were working with groups of students and young people, or if you were like having a BioBlitz, a public awareness BioBlitz, because you could set several up, and the students, as they got their organism, they could bring it up to one of the stations and take the picture with it. Same with a community event. The downsides, of course, is you have to log the location when you upload the photos to iNaturalist, which, if you're just in one place, is not hard to do. And you have to upload through the website rather than the app. And for some people, that's a big deal. For me, it's not. Now, I told you I was really proud of myself for figuring this out. Like, oh, I am. And then I reached out to just the MacroBlitz community and I said, send me your stories, send me your pictures of you doing MacroBlitz. And a group from Thailand, and there's two of them here tonight. So shout out, thank you for coming. Sent me this picture, and I'm like, oh, and they took this picture in September, which means they've already thought of it. And I was like also proud of myself for like thinking of it. It's like, no, no, everybody knows, everybody but you knows this, Anne. Everybody would have come up with that. So I like the way they have this set up. Like, for example, you can see that they're in the shade, probably to make it easier to take the picture. They have a little charging brook here. So, yeah, this is a nice setup. And we will see if we have time. We'll take a look at their photos that they got at the towards the end. And here's a closer picture of it. Okay, so in summary, I did this chart of what's good for, what's good for what. And so I would say I'm at the point now where I'm saying, well, if you use a phone and a clip-on lens, uh, that's best for someone who's new or an occasional macro blitzer. This isn't going to be something you're going to do regularly. And by regularly, I mean even every year. The Olympus TG, that's if you're going to be all in and a little weird about it, like me. This is my nerdery. This is my nerd. This is my geek. This is my thing that makes me happy. And then use the coin microscope if you're thinking about using it with a group. You can buy 3 or 4. The one I used, you'll see the pictures here in a moment. It cost about $100 US, which isn't cheap, especially if you're buying multiples of them. But it's cheaper than the Olympus TG, and it works well for groups. So, all right, let's take a look at the photo quality. Are these the photos? Yes. I'm going to put these in the chat, and so you can kind of get close up on your own screen. Um, I thought I shared them. Yep. And copy and paste. There we go. Into the chat. All right. So I'm going to go through these photos. And these photos were taken with um, different means. So we have this photo here of what's commonly called a scud. I am not a scud expert. And this was taken with the Olympus TG. Now you can see in the background here that grid, that 6.35 millimeter or quarter-inch grid. And so this is a pretty small organism. Um, I feel like it's a little overexposed. I'm still learning how to use the light on the Olympus TG, but you could scroll in and can see the antenna pretty well. There's 4 of them. Um, the other diagnostic character is the appendages on the back, and this one's got its tail tucked under, so you can't really see that. But this gives you an idea of what an Olympus TG photo can look like. This is the same organism taken with a coin microscope. It's called the Tomex. And this one has actually a little screen attached to it. So you get to see what it is that you're taking a picture of. And some of them, you attach it to your phone and you look at it on the phone, or you attach it to a computer. Some of them work that way. So, again, remember our criteria for a good photo is it identifiable to order or family on iNaturalist? And yeah, absolutely, this is. Okay, this little guy is a mosquito pupa, and I took this with the Olympus TG a few days ago. It's kind of appalled we're already finding mosquito pupa, but here we are. And then I took this with the coin microscope, and I think this picture speaks to sort of the challenge of taking, again, a pretty small organism that's moving around. Uh, but it's sort of identifiable. I mean, I probably would try to get another photo to get some more clarity around the head here, but it's a good start. And this is what I took with my phone. I didn't have for that first scud, I didn't have my phone with me, or more than likely I forgot. So I would probably want to try to get a dorsal view of this as well, just so we could see what it looked like. But again, it's the same organism. This one, this one, and this one are the same organism, um, taken with different photography methods. And you can see we're right about that 6.35 millimeter or quarter inch size. So these are pretty small. Olympus TG, this is a damselfly. The damselfly was the first organism I ever pulled out of the water when I was setting up the MacroBlitz. So it's a pretty special organism to me. This one, this one I took with the coin microscope, not great, but remember, it's identifiable to family or order. And I think some of the issues around it are more due to user error, by which I mean me, than the impact or the quality of the device. And by comparison, here is one taken with my phone. This guy is a little bigger. He is about 13 millimeters or about half an inch. So the bigger they are, generally the better it is. I think the larger size actually had an issue, was part of the issue, because look how crisp and in focus the line is. Um, Remember, you're outside and I'm trying to focus the coin microscope uh, outside on a screen using a screen. And that's a challenge. I had it in the shade, but it was still kind of hard to see crisply. And also, I hadn't figured out how to manage the light, the built-in light. All right, this is where you're going to see where the coin microscope actually is pretty good. So this is what's called a copepod, and they are tiny. They are probably less than 2 millimeters. So this is taken with the TG, totally unretouched. This is straight from my SD card to up to my Google Photos. And this is the CopaPod with some photo editing. It's the same photo, but I changed the contrast. I sharpened it up a little bit. And you're like, oh yeah, I can see that a little better. And down here is the CopaPod with the Tomex, the coin microscope. Now, the thing that the coin microscope that was able to capture that the Olympus TG couldn't, and I think again this is user error, is the antenna. You can see the antenna on the copepod on the coin microscope. that even on the photo edited, and I was trying, but I don't really see them. I think I'd like to, maybe that right there, but I also could be like looking at a scratch in the Petri dish. So, okay. All right. So we've taken our photos and we've uploaded it to iNaturalist. So now let's talk a little bit about what happens to it on iNaturalist. And this is what the MacroBlitz project looks like on iNaturalist. And yes, am I signed in? Yes, I am signed in. All right. So what you're looking at here with the iNaturalist project, and this is probably, we're going to go deep into the weeds on iNaturalist, but it's the only way I know how to have this make sense. This is what's called an umbrella project. It is a bunch of collection projects that are all lumped together so you can see them at the same time. So you can see we've got multiple MacroBlitz projects, and that's because they're all looking at a slightly different thing. And we'll talk about why in a moment. Um, MacroBlitz is currently in North and South America. However, I am open to creating other projects for people in other regions, like I did for the folks in Thailand. The caveat here is that I'll show you in a minute is you might have to get a regional entomologist to help you with some of the um, taxa you might want to see. And if that sounds like what, let's take a look. So I am going to go look at this MacroBlitz nymphs project. A nymph is an insect that undergoes incomplete metamorphosis, which means it doesn't pupate. So our mosquito would never end up in this project. It's a larva because it pupates. All right. Um, So let's take a look at this. The thing you need to understand about MacroBlitz collection projects is they are essentially saved searches. Every time you click on that, like for example, that MacroBlitz nymphs, I'll go back here. Every time I click on that, I'm essentially issuing a query, a search for into MacroBlitz data. And so MacroBlitz is, and I'm anthropomorphizing a little bit here. MacroBlitz search engines go through all the MacroBlitz identifications, and it's looking for those observations that you say you want to look at. And it knows which observations you want because you set them up when you set up the project. For example, in the project requirements, you can set up taxa. Which taxa do you want to see in this saved search, in this collection project? So we have all the taxa, and these are mostly North and South American taxa um, that will show up in our MacroBlitz NIMS project. We say where we want it. And again, we picked these because that's where my entomologist was from. That's what he knew, and that's what he was comfortable saying. This is what should go into a MacroBlitz project. We can have any user. We need it to be research grade or needs ID, not casual. So if you forget to add the location, or if you upload it and it doesn't have the time, if you upload it for some reason your identity, we don't know who uploaded it, is doesn't follow the upload, that's extremely rare, by the way. That's automatically considered casual and it will not make it into the project. Probably the biggest thing that the biggest challenge in in the requirements is the annotation of the life stage. All the projects, all the observations in this project have been annotated as a nymph. And let me go ahead and see if I can show you what an annotation looks like. I'm looking for one of mine. Um, there have been a lot of observations added, which is kind of exciting. 2 days ago. Um, I think what I'll probably do, sorry for the scroll roll here. I'll just go up to my observations and open that, and I'll find my nymph. All right, here we go. All right, so this is a narrow-winged damselfly that I uploaded. I observed it on November 11th and I submitted it the next day. I generally use the website rather than the app, simply because I started iNaturalist on the website and it's just more second nature for me. After you upload it, and it gets all like nice and everything, you come back and you annotate it. So I had to annotate it nymph. So if you've uploaded an observation that meets that project requirements, it's like, yeah, this is a dragonfly. Why isn't it showing up in the MacroBlitz project? Well, check the annotation. And one of the challenges is going back to our project is that you can only have one annotation per project. So in this NIMS project, we can't have damselflies, odonata, damselflies and dragonflies, and caddisflies because caddisflies have larvae and they pupate, whereas odonata, dragonflies, and damselflies don't. They're nymphs. So that is the reason behind so many projects is that we specifically wanted to annotate for these specific stages. If we did not annotate like dragonflies and damselflies for the nymph stage, we would get the adults in this project, which would be great, but adult odonata are not aquatic. At that point in their life, they're terrestrial. So we were looking specifically for aquatic, in their aquatic stage organisms. That explains that, hopefully, a little better. It's very confusing. Um, a lot of it's just due to the clunkiness around iNaturalist, but we work with it. Another thing to keep in mind is observations are added to the iNat project passively. You cannot actively add observations to any MacroBlitz project, which means that when you upload the observation, as long as it meets the requirement, it gets swept into the project. There are probably thousands of people who have observations in one of our MacroBlitz projects and don't have a clue. The way you get your organism to have that cool little MacroBlitz badge, and let me just go forward again a couple of times. I should just open this separately. Here we go. You can see there, this has a cool little MacroBlitz badge on the page. It's because I've joined the MacroBlitz project, the big umbrella project. Um, and so you'll see all the projects I've joined because the uh, icon is on the page, but I can't make it go into a project. That's a traditional project on iNaturalist. All right. That was a lot. Um, hopefully useful. I am going to stop recording. And if anybody has any questions or they want me to show them something, feel free to